Welcome everyone. As people are slowly coming into our digital forum here, I want to welcome all of you. My name is Abraham Kim. I'm the Executive Director at the Council of Korean Americans, and we are so thrilled for today's fabulous and amazing program. We're honored to host this program to showcase a trailblazer in the classical music and opera world, San Francisco Opera Music Director Eun Sun Kim. I could not know a better way to kick off the start of the month of May, which many of you know is the Asian American Heritage Month, than to share this program with our community and with all of you. To start this evening's program, I would like to introduce to you Sue Van Kantisen, co-chair of CKA's Arts, Culture, Entertainment, and Sports Initiative. This group is responsible for driving CKA's amazing art and cultural programs. In addition to her leadership at CKA, Sue currently serves as the board chair of the National Sports Governing Body of U.S. Squash, serves on the board of several public education-related nonprofits, as well as the board of the San Francisco Opera. She has a distinguished career in finance, entrepreneurship, and philanthropy. So we are so honored to have Sue to introduce our program and our moderator for this evening's webinar. Over to you, Sue.
Great. Thank you, Abraham, for that kind introduction and also for your leadership of CKA. It is my great pleasure to connect my dual passion for San Francisco Opera and the Council of Korean Americans and introduce tonight's special program. We're delighted to host a fireside chat with a trailblazer in the music performance world. Upon Eun Sun Kim's appointment at the San Francisco Opera, the New York Times ran the headline, "She's Making History." She is the first woman to hold the music director post at an American company of major size and stature. And as I like to say to my friends, well, it's no surprise she is Korean too. We are very fortunate to have our CKA member, Dr. Travis Cross, bring relevant perspective to moderate this conversation. Travis serves as professor of music at UCLA, where he conducts the Wind Ensemble, directs the graduate wind conducting program, and chairs the music department. He also has a deep passion for mentorship and served as the associate dean for academic mentoring and opportunity there. Having come to learn a little bit about Travis and his extensive travel schedule, it did not surprise me to understand that he has appeared as a guest conductor and composer in nearly 40 states, in addition to many international posts. And he is a recipient of numerous awards. Thank you, Travis, for joining us here today. But before I turn it over to you, I would like to introduce a special guest in the audience, Matthew Schilbach, General Director of the San Francisco Opera. Matthew is responsible for all artistic and business aspects of the complex and thrilling enterprise we call opera. I want to thank Matthew and Eun Sun for making this program possible and for their extraordinary talent for storytelling and connecting us to each other through their art. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us. And with that, I will turn over the program to Dr. Travis Cross.
Well, thank you, Sue, for that kind introduction. I want to start by expressing our gratitude to you, to San Francisco Opera and the Council of Korean Americans for making today's webinar possible. We are delighted to hold this fireside chat with Eun Sun Kim, who became the Caroline H. Hume Music Director of San Francisco Opera in August 2021. Described as a major star in making history by the New York Times, Maestro Kim is the first woman to hold the music director post at one of America's leading opera companies. Born in South Korea, she is also the first Asian to assume such a role. Prior to her debut at San Francisco Opera, Eun Sun Kim appeared at many of the leading opera houses across Europe, with a particularly strong relationship with Berlin State Opera and several productions also at Opera Frankfurt. Earlier in her career, she won the Lopez Cobos International Opera Conductors Competition at the Teatro Real in Madrid. And outside of the opera pit, Maestro Kim has conducted professional orchestras in Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Canada, and the United States, including the 2020 Concert de Paris with the Orchestre National de France and the Chœur de Radio France at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. It's a dazzling concert, and there's a stunning video of it available online. Her presence in North America began with performances of Verdi's Requiem with the Cincinnati Symphony and La Traviata with Houston Grand Opera, the latter earning her an appointment as the company's first principal guest conductor in 25 years. She achieved a series of important North American opera debuts at the Metropolitan Opera, Lyric Opera of Chicago, Washington National Opera, and Los Angeles Opera. Of her Met debut, the New York Times wrote, quote, "The star of the evening was the conductor, Eun Sun Kim," going on to praise her, quote, "musicianly care, assured technical command, subtlety, and imagination. It's been a long time," wrote chief classical music critic Anthony Tomasini, "since I've heard Puccini's scores so freshly played." At San Francisco Opera, Maestro Kim opened the 2021-22 season with Tosca and a new production of Fidelio. And we are excited to see her conduct a concert on June 30th featuring the music of Verdi. More information on tickets, including a discount code, will be shared at the closing of today's program. Maestro Kim is known for her musicianship, impeccable preparation and commitment to every detail of operatic performance, and unusual humility and eagerness to collaborate. She conducts with clarity and elegance. And friends of mine from both orchestra pits and operatic stages have offered nothing but praise for her insight, professionalism, and personality. We are fortunate to spend some time today with a brilliant artist, generous leader, and true trailblazer in the field of classical music internationally. Please join me in welcoming Eun Sun Kim.
Hi, Travis.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
We're thrilled to have you with us.
Thank
So
you for having me.
we're going to spend some time talking about making music, a little bit of time talking about lessons from the podium that may apply to general leadership situations and other situations in life, and a little bit talking about your identity as a Korean musician and as a trailblazer in the field. But first, I just want to start with some very basic questions to get to know you a little bit better, which is when and how did you first start making music?
Well, I came to play piano when I was 3 or 4 years old. My mom noticed that I could play piano without any music. So when I heard, obviously, music from radio or television, I was able to play it, repeat it on piano. So she knew that I was musical. So that's how I came to play piano. But I didn't want to be actually a professional musician or professional pianist because I had always stage fright. So when I had to participate in a competition or something, then I was so nervous on stage. And for example, that was like Chopin's Etude called Black Keys. So you have to meet all black keys, but I couldn't find even black keys and they all looked like white keys. So yeah, so that was actually a horrible experience for me. Even though I think I was only 10 years old or something. So I knew I was not going to be a professional musician. And then actually it came later that I majored in music and composition and conducting.
Well, so clearly you stuck with it, and you
Yes.
and you achieved to a level that you could go study music at university, conservatory. So I'm curious. You did study composition, and you continued to play piano. So when and how did you decide you wanted to become a conductor? What was it about your musical background that you feel prepared you to do that? And was there were there multiple people that encouraged you to make that leap?
Actually, I had always good teachers whenever it was really important, like a turning point in my life. And the recommendation that I would study conducting came actually from the conducting professor at Yonsei University I studied at. And I was a rehearsal pianist in our university opera production that was Puccini's La Boheme in that year. And when I was playing and working with the singers and following his conducting, he kind of observed me and he asked me to study conducting. So that's how I came to conducting. But the starting was just out of curiosity. So I was fascinated by music and by music making as well with colleagues. And it was just, okay, I'll give a try. And if it doesn't work, at least I learned the basic skill of conducting. So later on, when I compose something as a composer, maybe I will be able to rehearse an orchestra or something. So that was just the beginning idea. When I was really sure about becoming a conductor, or I could have this job, this music making as a conductor as my job, was actually at the competition in Madrid. So that was just, you just go in and you have to communicate with the orchestra without any word, just you show them. And they obviously played how I intended in advance. So it worked, even though I didn't know any word in Spanish, so I was not able to communicate with them verbally, but musically it just worked. So I realized, okay, I could have this conducting as my job. Yeah.
And it's wonderful, and it's wonderful when all those things come together and you have that sort of, it's almost a magic when everything works and the communication flows both ways, and it's got to be like flying when that sort of.
Indeed.
Can you tell us a little bit about your initial experiences conducting San Francisco Opera? And perhaps from there, I think you've written or you've said before in interviews that you weren't really aware that you were being considered for a position there. But can you tell us a little bit about how you reacted to when that possibility came up, and how those conversations unfolded?
So by the time that I made my debut in San Francisco at San Francisco Opera, I think I had already conducted more than 50 companies, orchestras in the world. But in San Francisco, I really felt from the first day really naturally being at home, and everybody was really not only professionally organized, but very friendly, and it was very comfortable. So I felt really comfortable in that environment. And then when Matthew Schilbach, our general director, asked me about the music directorship, I think I asked him back right away, why? Why me? And because I was surprised that that he asked so soon, because music directorship means actually a long relationship. And by that time, I just had made my debut. So I was just I think I wanted to ask him how sure he was about that. But you can actually feel, even the very first moment, like you fall in love in the first moment, and you cannot say why you fall in love, right? So you know when you know. So I think there was a good chemistry between the company and myself, between the orchestra and chorus and the whole company and myself, and I really felt comfortable in the company. Yes.
No, that's beautiful, and I think the analogy in a way to dating or to having a relationship, love at first sight, love at first downbeat, is such an accurate one, because if it doesn't feel right and if it doesn't feel comfortable, all the sort of challenging things about making music and compromising and dealing with questions of interpretation, they're all harder because there isn't that trust. It sounds like there was from the very beginning an inherent trust between you and the musicians and the staff and the organization.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Well, it's a great segue to some questions about some of the musical elements of your position. I realize most of the people on the call are not professional musicians by trade. So could you tell us a little bit about what the job of music director at a major opera company entails? You know, how is it different from coming in and guest conducting a single production? And how do you see your role, both musically, administratively, and as a face that's on banners all over San Francisco, as the public face of the company, and to a certain extent the art form itself?
So to explain actually what is really conductor doing on the podium, because primarily the music director is conductor and lead the music. I would say when you can imagine, when you have to tell a story from a book, you want to read a book to your kids, for instance, we always have same book, but everyone would have different speed, different atmosphere, different emphasis, so different direction as well. How they want to drive that the whole book. I think it's similar to us conductors, how you really want to shape the music from the same score. So the interpretation becomes really different by every conductor, because everyone has different temper, different music. So when interpreting music, when it says go faster, everyone would interpret in different way based on their rhythm. So the only difference, actually, storytelling or read a book to kids and interpreting the score as a conductor would be, we don't produce any sound physically. We have to let the orchestra, the singers, make the sounds really at their best. So I'm telling the story through the orchestra, through the singers. So that's how it works between the conductors and the other performance. So we're making music as music director, and administratively, I am responsible for any sound or any music that SFO creates, and to keep the highest standard when we produce any productions or any music. So that would be my job and responsibility as well. And I'm also involved in planning for the future and what kind of work we want to produce, etc., with my colleagues, as I said, Maestro Schilbach, our general director. So it's a busy job.
Absolutely. And can you sort of tell our audience a little bit about what it's like to work with a stage director? One of the big things about a theatrical production is pacing. How fast is everything going to move? How are you going to move from scene to scene, from idea to idea? And in a play, that's all up to the director. But in an opera, so much of that is written in the score, and you're the one driving that. Can you sort of talk a little bit about that relationship and how you compromise and find a shared idea for the entire piece?
Well, compromise is really a good word, because we interpret one score together, all together. So everybody would have their own interpretation before we meet, but usually stage director and the conductor, we meet ahead of the production start. So we share our thoughts about the piece and how we would interpret the piece, etc. Of course, there are specific things that you want to drive in a particular way, but then you really have to talk with other partner. But primarily, they rehearse with the singers and with the whole team, and then they are actually sitting at the end in the audience, or they just leave it to us. In an opera production, usually we have 7, 8 performances, shows, and they are all different. Of course, we intend that the biggest form is the same thing, but every single night we have different rhythms, and everybody feels differently in every night. So it'll become just a little different every night. So you have to also compromise dealing with every situation in every performance. Yeah.
And so just one more follow-up here, because I believe you conducted Bohème at the competition. Is that correct? Or very early on in your career, you had no, you mentioned Bohème as the production you were assisting on.
Right. So Bohème was actually the very first piece, and my how you say, like, the basic skill book, because I learned actually the basic skills, like how to beat 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3 with Bohème. So opera was actually at the beginning of my conducting career.
Aha. And that's somewhat unusual, because usually it's more common for a conductor to do symphonic repertoire and then kind of take the plunge into the opera pit after they feel really, really ready and prepared. And so you're starting with the hard stuff is so that leads to another question, which is sort of you conduct on the concert stage often, and you conduct in the opera pit often. What do you love most about conducting opera, and what do you love most about conducting symphony orchestras? And are there any differences in how you approach studying that repertoire?
Well, the biggest difference is, of course, in the opera, we're in the pit, the orchestra and I myself, and on the concert stage, we are on the stage. But as I was also educated, well, as I started with Bohème, but also as I was educated in Germany, actually opera, everybody starts with opera there too, because every single even small village has an opera theater. And actually there's no like divided career for the conductors, like opera conductor or symphony conductor. Everybody does everything. So that was very natural to me to do both world. The biggest challenge and also exciting moments in the opera performance is that the unexpected moment. So anything and everything can happen in the opera performance because you have such a big team. We have not only stage director and then all the staging, but also lighting and the stage, the set, and the chorus and the singers, and even just one singer can really feel tired in that evening or forget the words, and everything can happen. But if it comes all together, like overcoming all those hurdles, that's really exciting moment in opera and also storytelling. On the concert world, the rehearsal period is quite short and tight. So you would normally rehearse with an orchestra for 2 days and then the concert and it's done. But it's quite an intimate relationship, and there is just orchestra and myself, and not really much unexpected music making, but it's everything goes like by plan. So at the end, there is just one really going up in that moment from the rehearsal to the concert.
Beautiful. So about those repertoires, regardless of genre, are there works, and there are a couple questions coming in from the audience about this. Are there works that have taught you particular things about music? Are there composers to whom you're instinctively drawn, or are there composers that at first were difficult to understand, and now you got inside and really feel like you know them. Can you just tell us a little bit about music you love, and how that shaped you as a musician?
Well, I think I always say my favorite composer is who I am currently working with. So now I am in Houston now and working at Turandot. I'm performing Turandot now by Puccini. So Puccini is at the moment my favorite composer. Next week it will change, but but anyway. But there was a moment that I think I was 11 or 12 years old, and I went to a concert where a pianist played Tchaikovsky first violin and piano concerto, and I was so fascinated and almost breathless there. I was so staying there, like almost holding my breath, and I still can feel that moment, that buzz, and almost smell the concert hall still. So I think it's the really transformative power of music and being in a live performance, because you are there and you feel the vibe. And so I think in terms of music making, whoever I'm working with, which composer or whoever, I think I'm really seeking for that kind of moment. And I mean, in the composer that was difficult at the beginning, that would be Dvorak, Rusalka. When I actually conducted Rusalka at San Francisco Opera for my debut, and it was only because of the language, the Czech. So at the beginning, I had to really learn Czech in order to interpret it and in order to make those dramatic drive. So you really have to understand the language and culture and really insight of the composer. So that was a hard moment, but after that process, that was.
No, that's wonderful, and there are questions. You are well known for your command of languages, which is really important in opera in ways that are easy to understand. But how did languages always come fairly naturally to you? Is it something you've worked with over the years? I mean, have you spoken many languages for a long time? Do you kind of learn a new language if you're going to do a new piece? How do you do that? How do you make all that work?
Well, I still learn or study all the languages today because I was born in Korea. My first language is Korean. And as you might know, Korean is very different, synthetically, very different from European or Latin languages. So if I don't practice it, if I don't speak it, I just forget those languages. But not only in opera, in music making, but also in symphonic work, I mean, all the composers or every composer, any composer would compose a music based on their language rhythm, based on their language wave, let's say. All the nuances might be different, of course, between Beethoven and Mozart. They're all like German speakers, but the nuance and the language and character is different. But in order to understand that, I think language is very important. Also, to perform it, let's say in a string instrument, how fast you want to go with your bow, and why there is a down bow or out bow, the skills, it all is related to the language of the composer. I really believe that. So that's why I'm also learning the languages, and I still want to conduct Russian operas, for instance, when I am able to speak, when I can say I know the language really well, then I'll probably conduct Russian operas.
Wonderful. So this is just kind of a basic question for musicians who are here in the program. What advice might you share with a young musician who is considering or is just beginning to embark on a professional performing career, whether they're a conductor or an opera singer or they want to play in an orchestra? What kinds of advice would you share with young musicians for their success?
Well, actually, you mentioned the Travis beforehand a very important thing, and I think trust the colleagues, the trust between the orchestra and conductor, or even among the orchestra, or in the chorus, or between the singers and the musicians. That is, I think, very important. And when you are a young musician, you have, of course, your ideal in your brain, and you have your own interpretation. You want to achieve many things. And sometimes if it doesn't work with your colleagues, you're getting a little nervous or impatient, etc. And you have feeling also based on my experiences. I think when I was younger and I was on the podium, still you're a leader on a podium, and you have to lead suddenly like 200 people. And when it didn't work, I used to think like in the next day, oh, they might not come with me, so I have to go. But they will come. So the trust, I think, but the experience teaches you. And I would say just have fun with music and have trust and faith and believe in yourself.
That's great. And I'm curious just to know, I mean, are you able to keep the fire all the time? Do you just get excited and joyful every time you step on the podium? Or are there times when, oh boy, just this is going to be a difficult day? I mean, it's about one of the things for people who are watching, the verbs we use in music, they're a mix. We say play an instrument, but we call it a work. You say you're going to work. So it's this real mix of hard work, of industry, but also of wonderment and joy and love. And can you talk a little bit about kind of how those two fit together, and how they keep you going?
Well, that's the most difficult point and thing, I think, for a conductor, because as we talked about beforehand, you really have to move the musicians, move your colleagues to enjoy that moment. And that, if we achieve that, the audience will feel the difference, whether they are just playing skillfully or whether the orchestra musicians or the performers are really enjoying it. So once we have feeling because we are enjoying, I think we're forgetting that we are working. So it's one of our privilege, I think, moments that we can say we are working or we are having a job where we can really enjoy and we're good at. So, but it's interesting. I was in a concert in Europe, and the conductor said, that was interesting that my orchestra, they just had played Siegfried's funeral march, and the musicians told me we so enjoyed this piece, but it's actually, enjoying the funeral march, the words, as you said, it's weird, it's a strange thing, but when the musicians really enjoyed that moment or enjoy playing that march, it really sounds like a funeral march. So it's a magical moment of music making.
Well, and you mentioned this earlier, just being in the room, right? I think for people, feeling the vibrations.
Yes.
There is a physical joy that comes from being around live music. And even if the music is sad or angry, if the emotions are not necessarily happy, there's something energizing about being around that much sound. And we get the best seat in the house. You know, we're right inside it, and it washes over you, and it's hard not to be moved by that kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So you also talked about leadership, and I know a lot of people on the call are leaders in their own fields, and you know, conductors are somewhat famous as motivational speakers or as business, you know, speaking to business leaders, because we have to bring large groups of people together and get people who have to have very strong skills and very strong opinions. Like, you don't want musicians who have no point of view. But then you want them to bring their strong points of view, and then it's our job to find a way to knit it together into one shared interpretation. So I'm curious what you think players and singers most want and need from a conductor. You know, of all the information we give them and of all the sort of emotional support that we might provide, what do you think they're looking for and they want the most from us and need from us?
I think a clear direction. They might not, let's say one of the 80 orchestra musicians might not really agree on that particular interpretation or that particular bar that I want to move forward. Maybe he might not want to move forward. But if it's a clear direction, if it's really clear, I think that's what the orchestra or the biggest group, the big group wants to see from a conductor. But I'm always aware, and I have it that always in mind, because I was taught by my teacher in Korea. He also said to me, when you go somewhere to conduct your first, let's say, fifth Beethoven symphony, you really have to have it in your mind that the musicians in front of you might have played 300 times. So they might know the piece better than you. And what are you going to do with those musicians when you are doing it for the first time, still being a leader? So that's the most exciting part, actually, being a conductor, that you really have to listen to them and then share actually your interpretation. But as a leader and supporter, I mean, we are not like giving a direction like a teacher, but we're kind of supporting them to give their best, or to give their best version of their professional music making.
Right. And you know, I don't want to embarrass you, but you know, what's written so much about you is your humility, the way that you make people feel. I'm sorry, I did embarrass you, but you know, you make people feel welcome and valued. And you know, oftentimes the old maestro of 100 years ago, 50 years ago, was a dictator who said, "Do it like this. I am the one who has the vision. You will follow." You said it yourself, we don't make any sound. They're the ones that make the sound. So our job is really to facilitate, to empower, to encourage the people who make the sound to make a great sound. So what I love about what you've just said is you have opinions, you have ideas, you know exactly how you want Beethoven 5 to sound. But approaching it with the humility that everybody brings something to the table, and you're almost trying to unleash their creativity and channel it, I think lies at the crux of being a successful conductor. And so I know it's hard to talk about this. I know it's hard to put it into words. But, you know, when you're conducting an opera, everyone there is an expert. I mean, San Francisco Symphony, every single person in that room is just an amazing expert at what they do. And you're the one who stands in the middle and makes it all go together. Is there anything you think of when you set the tone for that environment? Is there anything consciously you do to try to help people feel welcome and empowered to do their best? Or do you simply just go in there and do the work and it just happens because that's how good you are? I mean, what do you think about it?
I think I don't know if I'm ever thinking about like setting the tone. I think what I'm doing is just try to speak what really try to make the musicians understand what I really found in this composer's work. So I really believe that this composer would have wanted to say this and that. So I'm trying to, every conductor would stick with the score, of course, but the output might be different, but I think I'm really trying to stick with the indications or the storytelling of the composer. And as we talk about that, every single musician is professional. They would get it, what it really means. And also, as we know, our audience might not know, we have different sheet music. The conductors have a full score where we can read all the instruments are playing. Each single instrument or each single musician, they only have their line, one single line. So I'm trying always to have them listen to the others, explaining them, you are now playing with that kind of instrument. So you have to make this ensemble and that ensemble, etc. So really kind of explaining our full score, how it looks like to the musicians. So they are really being aware of being in a group.
Yeah, one of the things you said there, which I say, a lot of people say, watch the conductor, and I say, listen to each other, listen to each other. We can solve problems on our own by listening, and oftentimes I try to, if something goes wrong, my first instinct isn't watch me. My first instinct is listen to them. Here's the person that's going to help you the most, and I think that's something that people who aren't musicians can really take away from how musicians work. Nobody listens enough in their lives, and you're forced to do that to be successful as a musician. I think the other thing that I thought was really interesting, you talked about trust earlier, and you're also talking about trusting the score. You're talking about trusting the composer. So there are some conductors who really get in there and mess with it. They want to put their stamp on it. They want to change things, change tempos in ways that might be creative, but might not really be serving the work or the score. And it seems to me that you're talking about you're talking about exploring, trying to get inside the music, find the meaning there, and then share it with the ensemble. So here's just one more kind of leadership question. You've talked about your teachers a little bit, or your role models, people you've watched. Is there anything you can share that you learned, maybe even from the piano when you were coaching or when you're doing rehearsal piano playing, that you learned that kind of changed the way you think about music? And is there anything you hope to share with people who have the opportunity to be assistants to you or to be pianists, coaches in rehearsals you lead?
Well, particularly in opera, what I learned from the very beginning from my teacher in Korea, that was help the singers. I know the audience might just see the singers. Mostly they can see the singers because the orchestra is in the pit, the singers moving around on the stage and the singing. But what we might not forget is actually the musicians and the conductor, we have the notes, but the singers are really busy on stage. They have to memorize all the score, first of all, the text, and then the direction which stage director gave, and then the musical direction what the conductors gave. So they're really busy, and then at the end, in every performance, they also have to think about their skill, their technique, in order to reach, so in order that their voice can travel really well. So they're really busy. So what I'm trying to do in an opera production is really to support the singers first. And also physically, the orchestra and the conductor, when we are in the pit, we are able to listen to them. But the singers on the stage, just physically, it's very far away. Also, when they sing, they cannot simultaneously really hear the orchestra because of their own voice sound. So one of the technical or practical job or task for me is to support the singers there. Yeah.
That's great. So just a kind of quick question. Who are your role models as a conductor? Who are the people that you watch and say, I want to be like that, I want to emulate that? And how did you find them? How did you discover them?
I know I cannot be like him, but I assisted one Kirill Petrenko, the music director of Berlin Philharmonic, 11 years ago. And when I assisted him, I just learned what is really a conductor and how we should take a look, or how we should think in music, think in scores, and how we should work with the colleagues. And really, he had so much patience with the singers and with musicians, yet it was always fun to be in a rehearsal room with him, because he really knew how to pace the rehearsal and how to work with the colleagues. So yes, he is, my mentor and my role model.
Wonderful. And you are now a role model to others. It's always difficult to kind of think about that, but you've been asked in many interviews, and you always talk about leading with the music and leading with the work, with doing a great job, with being a great conductor, with bringing everything that you can to the music. And I notice when people write articles about you and how you are a trailblazer and a pioneer, the first this, the first that. The quotes aren't from you; they're from other people saying, "Well, Eun Sun Kim is this and Eun Sun Kim is that," and so on and so forth. But you are absolutely a trailblazer. People, look at you and see, maybe I could do that because I see someone who looks a little bit like me doing that. So, what do you hope that younger female conductors, younger Asian conductors, non-white conductors, what do you hope that they learn from seeing your career? What do you want them to take away from it?
Just like you said, if she can do it, I could do it. But I know, as you just said, it's people talk about my figure being woman and Asian, yet on a leadership position. But when we're really working with the musicians, it's really not an issue. It's the same thing that I would not consider, or just there is no time for me to think, oh, there is a woman flute player sitting or male oboe player sitting. I'm just, there is no time for that. And I really believe the orchestra musicians would see me also just as a conductor. Of course, there's always a little moment at the very beginning when I come to an orchestra for the first time and I walk in, they look at me like with curiosity. But once my downbeat is there, once we start with music, it just disappears. So it might be really different for the audience to see a woman on the podium. And I think the reactions are really natural. I mean, I always compare when I do the interviews with other people, I always tell the journalist, if it's an American or European guy, then I do just imagine that you would come like blonde hair and blue eyes. You would come to Korea and you explain to me, I'm gonna make music like with Korean traditional music, and I'm gonna explain to you. Then I would be also immediately really skeptical. Can he or she speak Korean, or does he know Korean culture, or does he really know what he's doing now? So in order to explain to me about the Korean music, so I would be also very skeptical or very curious what he's talking about. So it's happening actually to me here in Europe or in the States, just the same thing. So I see those reactions in a natural way, not like really critical way.
I also noted that when you talked about a role model, you mentioned a male conductor. Uh,
Yes. So,
and my teacher was a woman,
oh,
and
I see.
so I think it's we learn so much just about music and about art from these people, and it's anyone can teach anyone and anyone can learn from anyone. So I think that's also a point well made. That I hope you're inspiring a generation of young female conductors. I hope you're inspiring Asian conductors, but I hope you're also inspiring young male conductors with the craft and with the excellence as well. So here's a question I'm curious about. How do you think your Korean culture, your upbringing, has shaped you as a musician and as a conductor? We talk here a lot about being an American musician and what that means, or being a French musician and what that means. What do you think makes a Korean musician? Is there anything culturally that you think colors your work?
Well, it's very complex, I think, with me, because I grew up in Korea, and I actually was 24 when I left my country. And now it's becoming almost half of my life I grew up in Korea, and then almost the other half of my life I spent in Europe. So I feel sometimes there was a conflict moment that if I was feeling as a Korean, or what am I? So how can I identify myself, etc. But most importantly, I think based on my education in Korea, like being a Korean, we use a lot of times we, the Koreans, not I or my, but we use usually we and our. We do the group, and we always think about others and bringing. So I think it's shaped kind of my language and my style of working as well. I noticed that when I was talking with a German musician as well, he pointed it out. You use a lot like we or our, etc., instead of I want to do this or etc. So I think it's one of my Korean side.
Well, that's such a beautiful side, because that's that's collaborative language. That is inclusive language. I think that can't help but influence how you make music. I think that's a really beautiful articulation of that. So you began your appointment with San Francisco Opera during the pandemic. So I'm just curious if you've been able to engage much with the Korean American community in San Francisco. Are there any places you found, any great restaurants even that you found that have been meaningful to you?
I need recommendations. So
Please put them in the
please
chat.
use chat for restaurant recommendations. Because since we started in the middle of pandemic, actually I have been only in the opera house and home. And also because we were so busy opening the theater again after almost 2 years closed because of pandemic. So I mean, I'm really hoping to explore San Francisco and Korean American community in San Francisco as well.
Well, and I'm sure they will embrace you with open arms very wholeheartedly, and look forward to watching that relationship continue to flower. So we're almost out of time, but I want to give you a chance without giving away any unannounced details. What do you want our webinar audience to know about the coming season for San Francisco Opera, or anywhere else in the world that you'll be conducting in the months ahead? Any highlights we should be watching out for?
Well, as we talked about at the beginning, I'll be conducting a concert on June 30th. That will be the Verdi concert. Will do several Verdi pieces there, and it's also one of my projects in the future in San Francisco that I'll have a project of one Verdi opera and one Wagner opera per season. I'll conduct that for building our musicality in San Francisco and building a long relationship with our orchestra and chorus. So that will be the very beginning of that project, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Wonderful. And then just a final closer question before I pass it back off. What do you love most about being a musician and a conductor? What do you want people to experience when they attend your performances, and why is classical music important to all of us?
Well, you know, we talked about the live performance or being in a live performance. I really believe we interpret as a musician the work, the piece of a composer. But I really believe every audience member in a live performance interprets the piece as well. Whether they are a musician or a non-musician, they would have their own interpretation, their own feeling. And I really want every single audience to have that personal connection to that piece when I'm conducting, whether that was how I was intending or just they had their own imagination, but that experience will stay in their mind, and that's the transformative power of music that we talked about, and I really hope that happens with our audience.
Well, and I look forward to being in that audience in the near future, and I know that many of our audience members here will have a chance to see you, whether it's San Francisco Opera or other places around the world. So I just thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts with us and giving us a little glimpse into what makes you who you are as a musician. But the good stuff is on the podium, and the good stuff is in the orchestra pit. So get thee to San Francisco to see Eun Sun Kim conduct. I want to pass it off now to Linda Butcher from Council of Korean Americans, who will tell us even more about how we can see that spectacular Verdi concert with Eun Sun Kim. Thank you very much, Maestro, for being here.
Thank you, Travis. I really enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Music Director Eun Sun Kim and UCLA Professor Travis Cross for a lively, fun, and inspirational discussion. I know that I'm going to head over and subscribe to the San Francisco Opera YouTube channel so that I can keep up with Eun Sun Kim and her upcoming concerts. Not to mention, I, like Travis, will have to make a trip to the Bay Area soon. For those who are in the San Francisco area or have plans to visit, we're happy to share that we have a special promotion code for you. Thanks to the generosity of the San Francisco Opera, everyone who attended today's webinar will receive a 30% discount for the Thursday, June 30 concert titled Eun Sun Kim Conducts Verdi. For more information, please visit www.sfopera.com/Verdi and use promo code CKA30. You'll also see details for the June 30 after party event with Eun Sun Kim that we would love for you to attend. Proceeds for the after party will help support Eun Sun Kim's vision for the future of opera. All this information and more will be shared in a post-event email. In closing, I would like to once again thank Eun Sun Kim for taking the time to share your incredible journey with us, to Travis Cross for moderating an excellent fireside chat, and to the many individuals who made today possible. Sue Venkatesan and Charlotte Coe, our amazing co-chairs of the Arts, Culture, Entertainment, and Sports Initiative at the Council of Korean Americans, our wonderful CKA Executive Director, Abraham Kim, who you heard from earlier today, Matthew Schilbach and the San Francisco Opera, and our remarkable staff who ran today's seamless webinar, Francis Kong, Angela Cho, Eileen Chung, and So-Yeon Kang. And a special thank you to you, the audience, for joining us, for spending time with us, and for continuing to share the great work that we do at CKA. To learn more about upcoming events and opportunities, please visit www.councilka.org. I'm Linda Butcher, Senior Director of Programming Initiatives, wishing you a great evening or rest of the day, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thank you.